Good afternoon, welcome. Honorable colleagues, distinguished experts, dear participants, it is a real pleasure to welcome you to this public hearing on suspicion of procedures for eviction and squatting. I am also pleased to welcome the members of the newly constituted Special Committee on the Housing Crisis in the European Union, who have been invited to participate in PETI hearing today. This public hearing aims to address the concerns raised by petitioners and explore the potential for the EU-wide approach to safeguard property rights and streamline legal process for property recovery. The hearings will consist of a first part focusing on squatting and evictions in the EU and the right to property under rule of law, followed by 25 minutes of question and answer. Then a second part addressing the European Commission's affordable housing plans and social housing in the EU, also followed by question and answer. Part first, next speaker will be remotely. I'm pleased now to give the floor Professor Dr. Sergio Nasarre, Professor of Civil Law at Rovira, Virginia University. He will present the topic, the right to property under the rule of law, political barriers and challenges.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If you can start the presentation, the slide presentation, please. There is a slide presentation. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I have been asked to do this presentation in English because it seems that the microphone doesn't work properly. So there is no problem for me. I hope this is fully understandable. I have been appointed this topic. This is a broader topic than the one that we have heard so far. First, I have to say that I fully agree with all the statements of Professor Tomás and Mrs. Pastor. They are excellent, of course, lawyers and researchers in Spain, and they have fully given all the details in relation to the situation of squatting in Spain. Therefore, I will focus my presentation on a broader topic that is related to the permanent and increasing deterioration of private property in Spain because of the legislator. The phenomenon of squatting is simply an example of this permanent deterioration by the Spanish legislator of the right of private property in Spain. Next slide, please. Here we have the first study of the European Central Bank of last year, stating that those countries which have a higher share of their citizens living as homeowners are richer. This means that households, as you see here in Malta, in Ireland, in Cyprus, or in Spain, these households, these families are richer than those families living, for example, in Germany, which is at the bottom. This is clearly stated by the European Central Bank next year, and this was because of homeownership. Homeownership necessarily entails the full protection of private property, and this is what is being challenged today. Next slide, please. This is the result. This is one of the results of one of most experts economist expert in relation to housing. It is Professor Waldstrom. This is a book of his of last year, in which he states that countries with higher levels of home ownership have lower wealth inequality. And he says, for example, if Germany were to increase its home ownership rate from 45% to 80%, similar to Spain, it will reduce its inequality by 0.14 Gini coefficient points, being zero total equality. This is a crucial point because it clearly states that when ownership, the right of private property is fully protected in a given country, things work better and inequality is reduced and households are protected. Next slide, please. This is a result of one of our research of the last 15 years, in which we show that there is a clear correlation. This is Eurostat data. There's a clear correlation among those countries that have more people living in flats, more widespread home ownership among families, and those countries have more affordable housing. These countries are Portugal, Spain, Malta, Italy, and nearly all Eastern European countries. On the contrary, there is also a correlation among those countries that have very weak protection and very weak interest in promoting home ownership or private property. These are usually the Northern European countries. As we can see here, Great Britain, which is no longer EU, but it is in Europe. So we have Great Britain here, we have the Netherlands, we have Denmark, we have Sweden. All these countries have a correlation among those, among less households living in flats, less widespread home ownership, so they have more families living as tenants, and they have a less affordable housing, so they have more families that are over-indebted. Next slide, please. So all these examples show that protection of private property and home ownership is crucial in a country for many reasons, but most important for the reduction of inequality and the protection of families. That's why all the researchers that deal with housing in the last, I've been working in housing for the last 30 years, we don't understand why the Spanish legislator has focused his legislation in reducing the ratio of home ownership and attacking and eroding the right of private property. Here is a graph, it's also following Eurostat data, that says that since the global financial crisis in Spain, the share of people living in their own flats has been reduced 5%. So from 80% to nearly 75%. This doesn't mean, as have shown in the previous slides, that access to housing has been more affordable. On the contrary, each piece of legislation, you see some of them here, Act 1/2013, Act 5/2019, Act 12/2023, all these pieces of legislation they have passed have attacked private property and have produced an increase of the prices of homes in Spain, as you see in the graph on the right. Next slide, please. Of course, this is an attack to Article 17.1 of the European Charter of Fundamental Rights that protects private property, and Article 1, Protocol 1 of the European Court of Human Rights. And here are some data about squatting. Squatting, as I have said in the beginning, is an example of this attack to private property and home ownership. And you see here that it isn't by chance that it has been increasing so much in the last years in Spain, and it has been reduced slightly in the most recent years. As you see here, everything started in 2013. It was prepared by social movements publishing course books, full course books published in the internet showing how to squat properly in Spain. Remember that, as have been said by Mrs. Pastor, squatting in Spain is a criminal offense. But nevertheless, this was absolutely tolerated, accepted by the Spanish legislature, saying no problem, they are promoting squatting in the internet, how to squat properly, how to make the connections in electricity, how to threat the neighbors, how to treat everybody, and so on and so forth, how to campaign against the police, and so on, in the internet publicly and openly. And it was a case, the SALT case in 2013 by the European Court of Human Rights, that basically said that those squatting have a preferred right to access to housing than those waiting in the waiting list of social housing for years in Spain. This was a call for the access to squatting, and you see it increased up to 2017, and after that it really didn't decrease. The only thing that happened, it was a change in the law in 2018, by which all these cases went to the civil courts, not the criminal courts. And you know, civil cases for squatting are not counted by the Spanish government. So we don't know really how many squatters are there in Spain, as Mrs. Pastor has already pointed out, for many reasons, but also because civil cases, which are the regular case since 2018, are not counted at all. And then there are other pieces of legislation that not only have tolerated squatting, but they have promoted squatting and protected even squatting. There were pieces of legislation in 2019, in 2021, and 2023 in different scales. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. So I have given here more examples of this attack, of this deterioration of private property in Spain that goes against the European Treaty of Fundamental Rights and the European Charter of Human Rights. You see here. There are many cases of recent pieces of legislation, including the recent Spanish Housing Act 12/2023, by which all homeowners in Spain have been expropriated without compensation. Now, housing in Spain is controlled by the government. This is the same regime as it is applied to mines or to water. Now the government can decide everything, can decide whom you have to sell, to which price, whom you have to rent, and at what price, and if you want to give your property, your home, as inheritance to your children, let's see if it fulfills the social function of ownership. So it is the government that decides what you can do or not with your home. You know, now you understand better that squatting is just another situation by which homes are no longer considered belonging to homeowners. There are many other cases, but because of the time, next slide, please, and I will finish up. Here is the conclusion. First, the European Union should avoid and discourage any policy that produces the erosion of private property of homes, as it complicates the access to housing. It makes families poorer and more vulnerable. Second thing, on the contrary, EU should implement and encourage housing policies that contribute to a greater distribution of home ownership among families and prevents its concentration in private or public hands, which makes them more dependent. And finally, and in relation to squatting, thus, the official tolerance, encouraging and/or legal protection of squatters, as has happened in Spain since 2019, is never a solution, because it's a case of hidden homelessness. Squatters should be removed effectively and efficiently, with all judicial guarantees. EU member states should create and encourage the creation of a legal framework of access to housing that minimizes squatting. And finally, there can be no democracy without the respect to private property, as it has happened in ancient Athens since 3,000 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aznar. Yes, now, dear members, the speaker, we have now we'll start the first round of question and answer. Mr. Professor Aznar.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I will try to answer the two questions I have been addressed a few minutes ago. First thing, by Mrs. Ezcurra, it was about if or to which extent squatting and these housing policies have contributed to the collapse of the housing system and the access to housing in Spain. Well, this contribution has been complete. I mean, we have been suffering 17 years of erratic housing policies, including this intrusion into private relationships, like lease contracts, for example, with the rent controls, and into the private property through squatting, for example. And I will give a number. I will give a number. This number comes from the Catalan Agency of Housing. In Catalonia, we have the two effects. We have the effect of rent control and squatting. So both mechanisms of intrusion into the private sphere of people, yeah? Of their patrimonies. Yeah? So I will give you a number. In 2021, which was the first year by which squatters were protected all over Spain, and it was the first year that the rent control in Catalonia was introduced, there were almost 168,000 lease contracts that were underwritten. While in 2024, there were only 118,000, which means a reduction of 50,000 lease contracts in just 3 years. This has been absolutely dramatic for the access to housing in Catalonia. And in relation to the average rent in 2021 used to be 844 euros per square meter, per month per square meter. Now, sorry, I am mixing the numbers. In 2021, it used to be 724, and in 2024, it was 844. So it was a huge increase of 120 euros per square meter per month, only in 3 years. So there is, I mean, I have been researching about housing for many years now, and you can track absolutely the collapse of the housing system in this little example for Catalonia clearly. And then I am now going to answer the second question I have been addressed. It was by Mrs. Miranda, and she asked about the source of the data. I am a researcher, as I have said, and all this data is backed by European Central Bank, Eurostat, simply raw data from Eurostat, also from University Rey Juan Carlos, and also by the Catalan Agency of Housing. So all are these public sources, and there is no cooking of the data. And yes, I mean, this was absolutely my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you.